Wake up for week 16. So we will dive into that. It's the next round of the fantasy playoffs. Congratulations to all of those of you who made it on through. Meanwhile, we're joined by producer Justin and the specialist, a cast of dozens that help us put on this show, and joined on screen as always by Michael F. Florio. I was gonna say this is like the longest week ever, but I feel like we had these last year. We actually had Wednesday games last year, so technically last week was not the longest week ever. It just felt like it.
Yeah, it definitely did. I mean, congratulations to those of you who are still playing. I had a couple of teams bounce this week, Marcus, and I don't know. It stinks, but I'm like, at least we had football. I don't know. I'm trying to be optimistic about it.
I completely understand. The other part of it is there is, as much as you don't want to lose in the playoffs, there is sort of that small joy in being able to just click one more team off the list, off the registry. Like I bookmark all my leagues, and so I can just take one more bookmark off. It's a little bit nicer at least. It clears up some of the clutter on my navigation bar a little bit. So we got plenty to talk about on the show today. We are one step from championship week. Should Dak be on your bench? We do our best to keep you updated on who's available and who's not with the ever-shifting COVID landscape across the league. And we're going to preview every single game on the weekend slate. So let's get started, as we always do, with some fantasy headlines, and we will start in Tampa. It was a rough game for the Buccaneers on Sunday night. Not only did they lose to the Saints 9-0, but they did lose some key pieces throughout the game. Leonard Fournette went down with a knee injury. He's being called week to week. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later on in the show. Mike Evans also left the game with a hamstring injury. He's sort of being monitored day to day right now for the Buccaneers. But the big one, Chris Godwin, torn ACL and MCL. He is out for the rest of the season, which means he is no longer available to the Buccaneers or to you in fantasy. So this sort of comes right on the heels of Bruce Arians kind of welcoming Antonio Brown back to the team after his league suspension. So, Florio, is it easy as saying, if you have Chris Godwin or if you just need wide receiver help, do you go out and do you try to find Antonio Brown?
Yeah, if Antonio Brown was dropped, and he was dropped in about a quarter of NFL.com leagues, I think if he's out there, he is the biggest pickup of the week right now. But he's not out there in a whole lot of leagues. So if he's not out there and you're looking for a Godwin replacement, I think you go to another team, because I think this is going to be Antonio Brown's season 100%. I think Mike Evans, if he plays, is obviously going to get a bunch of targets. We know Gronk is there. Then they have Rashad Perriman. They have Tyler Johnson, Scotty Miller. Perriman was kind of leading them when they were healthy, but I don't think it's a situation where if Mike Evans plays, I want to trust one of those other Bucs receivers. I think if Evans sits, then it could be Antonio Brown and someone else. But it's definitely Antonio Brown's season, and you got to love that they were considering cutting him, and then they were just like, no, he helps our football team. We need him again.
I mean, Bruce Arians had this attitude of, hey, man, one more screw up and you're gone, with the asterisk of, hey, if we get some major injuries and we need you to fill some slots, then maybe we will reconsider. And that seems to be where the Buccaneers are right now. I think as long as he's on the field, especially with no Godwin, you can expect targets. This is a guy that Tom Brady really lobbied for to bring in at the end of last year. We saw what he did throughout the postseason, and we know that he's going to get opportunities. Brady's going to find him with the football, especially, I think, after the frustrations of trying to get the ball to Tyler Johnson and Jalen Darden last week against the Saints. I think they will definitely try to get it in the hands of AB. So if he's out there, go get him, plug him into your lineup. Could end up being a pretty good start for you this week. Some confusion in Los Angeles surrounding Austin Eckler. At first, he was placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. Then it turns out that was a false report, and he is not on the COVID-19 reserve list. So at least as of the moment, things look like they are a go for Austin Eckler. Of course, we still got a few days until game time, so who knows what could happen. But, at one point when he was out, it looked for sure like you were going to go and pick up Justin Jackson. Do you still, though, make a move to add Justin Jackson just in case something happens in the next couple days?
100%. I think you should. We saw last week that Justin Jackson is the next man up in this backfield. He played the most snaps, had the most touches outside of Austin Eckler, and he looks good doing it. He also is the running back they have there with the similar skill set to Austin Eckler. So if Eckler was to miss, I think we could see Justin Jackson take on a lot of his pass catching duties. But whew, Eck, he says he's feeling good on Twitter. I need him. Lots of fantasy managers need him. The Chargers need him. He knows all of this. So, and it's a great matchup against the Texans. So if Austin Eckler, knock on wood, is safe, I think he's all systems go again this week.
If I could offer a little bit of advice to Brandon Staley, who I know is a subscriber and longtime listener of this podcast, wink, wink, just tell Austin Eckler to stay home, man. I mean, the dude's already in phenomenal shape. He's been playing football all year long. I don't know how many reps he needs in practice, but you guys need him. We would like to see him out there. Just tell him to stay home the rest of the week and, mask up. Just order DoorDash, have no contact at the front door, and then just have him ready for game time. Have him show up at the stadium just in time to get changed and get on the field for the game. Let's just make it easy on everybody.
He's a big gamer. Just leave him in a room with like his Xbox, right, his Twitch system. He's good to go.
Right, a little COD for the next few days, something like that, man. We'll get through together in this one. Equally big news out of Kansas City, Travis Kelce has been placed on the COVID-19 reserve list as well. This comes on the heel of that huge game he had against the Chargers, about 190 receiving yards, a couple of touchdowns, including the walk-off winner in overtime. It's not as easy as looking somewhere else, I think, on the Chiefs roster. There's really nobody out there that can replace Travis Kelce when he is playing at his ceiling, but are there places potentially on the waiver wire we can go to, I'm not going to say replace him, but at least maybe try to fill in the gap a little bit?
No, yeah, it's like what you said. You're not going to be able to replace him. In my league of record, I have Travis Kelce, so I'm struggling with this right now. But I think like Gerald Everett, who actually was the Seahawks' leading receiver last night, he could be a name that is still out there on the waiver wire. Evan Ingram, I know Evan Ingram is gross, but the Giants receivers are so banged up right now. He gets the Eagles this week. He could be another pivot option there. Jared Cook against the Texans, I think could sneakily be a good replacement option. He's in my top 15 tight ends this week. But again, if Travis Kelce misses, you're hoping for maybe like a quarter of that production that he gave us, last week. So a touchdown really. And I think the three names that I said all have a solid chance of scoring a touchdown. So those would be my top options in replacing Kelce.
I also have a deep sleeper at tight end that you might want to consider. That's a little bit later on in the show. So that's a tease to stick around and listen to this whole thing. Or I guess if you're listening to the podcast, you can scrub forward. But why would you do that? Because you're going to miss a whole bunch of stuff in the middle too. Don't do that. Just keep it. Listen to by the way, do you listen to podcasts at 1.5 times speed? I've tried this. I don't know if you're a fan of that.
No, I know I see people on Twitter all the time that are like, how do you not listen to, I'm like, because I like to enjoy what I listen to. Like, I'm not a robot trying to just consume as much information all day as possible. Like, especially because I listen to like comedy podcasts and stuff, and like, I don't want to listen to that sped up. That just ruins it.
Yeah, I tried it with a couple of comedy podcasts, and it's like they're just blowing through the jokes, and you don't really get the full effect of it. I was like, yeah, this isn't for me. So maybe I'm not listening to the right type of podcast or something. But comedy podcasts, it definitely doesn't work for. Maybe it works for this one. I don't know. Somebody try it and tell me. Let me know on Twitter. A few news and notes though to talk about here too. Talk about Travis Kelce being on the COVID-19 list. By the way, there is a chance he could be available based on the new protocols. If he tested negative a couple of times, he could come back for this week. So we're certainly keeping our fingers crossed for that. Tyreek Hill also placed on the COVID-19 reserve list for the Chiefs. So there is a chance that Patrick Mahomes could be without his top two pass catchers in this ball game. So that's something definitely to take note of as the week progresses. Jared Goff on the COVID-19 reserve list in a situation that seemed like a really good opportunity for him against the Falcons. Like he could have potentially been a sleeper candidate in 2 QB or Superflex leagues this week. So we'll see if he's going to be able to play for the Lions. Cole Beasley placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. And when this news broke, Twitter could not wait to pounce because obviously Beasley has been one of the more vocal anti-vaxxers throughout this whole thing. And now it seems as though, he has, I don't know, there's a tweet about sowing and reaping that seems appropriate. Although you were looking and you saw that he put out a social media statement recently as well, huh?
Yeah, he did. And basically he says that he's not playing because of COVID. It's not COVID's fault. It's the rules' fault because that's how everything works nowadays. And basically says that if you don't get it by now, no one can help you. I don't know what that means, Cole. I know of something that can help you if you were a little bit open-minded to it. But right now, Marcus, it feels like Cole Beasley and Kyrie Irving are like the pointing Spider-Man gif at each other.
They really should shake hands. I mean, I know this is not I know this is not
Should
an
they?
NBA pod. Maybe they shouldn't. You're absolutely right. I mean, I know this is not an NBA podcast, but there was an equal amount of Schadenfreude from Twitter when Kyrie Irving returned to the New Jersey Net or the Brooklyn Nets. Wow, how old am I? The Brooklyn Nets, only to immediately go on the COVID-19 list, go into protocols there. So this seems to be a similar situation with Cole Beasley. It means though he's not going to be available for this week in a situation where the Bills could really use him on the field.
Gabe Davis season continues.
Yeah, huge week last week. Now the opportunity remains, even with Emmanuel Sanders possibly coming back. Gabe Davis still very much in play in the Buffalo offense. One more piece of news. Daniel Jones still dealing with a neck injury. He's going on injured reserve. His season is over. I mean, I think we were long past the point of considering starting Daniel Jones. You're not starting Mike Glennon. You're not really starting really any Giants pass. You might not be starting any Giants. I mean, we're at the point where we're questioning even starting Saquon. I mean, can we really start any Giants right now? It's that bad.
It's to the point where I would be trying to get away from Saquon. I said Evan Ingram as a deeper tight end stream, and that's it. Like, yeah, after that, there's no one at all that you want on the Giants. And even those two are deeper options at this point. It feels gross calling Saquon Barkley a deeper option, but that's where we're at.
That's where we're at. I mean, I saw someone tweeting this morning that they were really going to seriously consider starting Ronald Jones over Saquon Barkley. That's a thing that seemed insane back in September, but here we are in December, and it is a legitimate possibility heading into Week 16. All right. Normally we do things we learned on the Monday show, but because we had games on Monday, 2 games on Monday and 2 games on Tuesday, it felt sort of appropriate to do a things we learned this week. I mean, we had 8 teams in play over the last couple of days. That is not something we normally get. So with what you saw on Monday and Tuesday, what is the thing that you learned?
That the Rams backfield is starting to look like a fantasy mess. And I put this in yesterday, and then at the end of the game, the Rams kind of used Sony Michel a lot more. So his numbers did look a little bit better, but 70-30% split on the snaps. We had 18 carries and 2 targets go to Sony Michel, 6 carries, 2 targets, a couple of plays called back, though, that Henderson would have made his day look a little bit better. And look, coming into this game, we were hearing a lot about a 2 running back approach, a hot hand committee. We know they like what Sony Michel could do as a power runner, but they also were talking of Darrell Henderson. So right now, I feel like Sony Michel is the top option there. But even he, I can't get excited for more than an RB2 because we know Darrell Henderson is a good running back in his own right. So if we're worried about a hot hand, it could go to either one of them now. So I think at best, they're like a low-end RB2 right now.
This sort of falls in line with what Sean McVay was saying about his running backs, where he kind of compared Henderson and Michel a little bit to what Dallas was doing or is doing with Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard. And it appears that is coming to fruition. At least that's what we saw on Tuesday night against the Seahawks. So maybe that's something to take into effect. It does put both of them in play, but it also sort of lowers both of their ceilings if they're both going to get opportunities. For me, I don't know if Jalen Hurts is a very good real-life quarterback. I think he's improving. I think he has some talent. I think he shows things in flashes. I know that people in Philadelphia are sort of frustrated with him at times. What I do know, though, is that he is a very good fantasy quarterback. And I think next year we should be talking about him potentially as a top 5 quarterback off the board. I mean, we know that you're going to have, Josh Allen and Kyler Murray and Patrick Mahomes still in the top 3. But I think Hurts kind of comes into that conversation somewhere below those guys. You look at what he has done running the football. He is about 44 yards behind Lamar Jackson, who we all agree is the preeminent rushing quarterback right now in the NFL. Jalen Hurts is on par with that. Yes, he probably still needs some work throwing the football, but even then you look at that, right? Right now, he's about 150 yards passing behind Lamar Jackson, fewer passing touchdowns, 4 fewer interceptions. So if we are up there with Lamar, and I should put Lamar Jackson in that conversation of the top 5 as well. If we're talking about Lamar Jackson being a top 5 quarterback, Jalen Hurts right now is doing just about everything Lamar Jackson is doing. I know it's not always pretty to watch, but for our purposes, it's effective. We'll let the folks in Philly find out whether or not he is the franchise guy. For us, we just want the production. And Florio, it has been there pretty consistently all year. I mean, at the beginning, we sort of laughed that no matter how it happens, he would get you 20 points. That has been the case pretty much all year long this year.
It has been, and I feel like Hurts has only gotten better as the year has progressed, and it's amazing that if you give a player time and a little bit of patience, they can get better, but that's what Hurts is doing. Like, he played great last night, and on the year, Marcus, he's the QB6 only because he missed a game. The only quarterbacks averaging more fantasy points per game than him are Josh Allen, Justin Herbert, and Tom Brady. Not Aaron Rodgers, Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. Like, this guy is a top 5 fantasy quarterback. I'm sorry, all those people who hated him coming into the year. He is better than I think anyone really anticipated as well.
I mean, look, I had high hopes for him, but I thought he was a fringe QB1. I thought he was somewhere around 11 or 12. Here he is right now at 6, heading into the final few weeks of the season. So I think this is a conversation that I'm very interested to hear when we get to the offseason. All right, we have gotten to a break. We're going to step away, and when we come back, the Cards, they got mauled by the Lions last week. Can Kyler lick his wounds and bounce back? We'll let you know on the NFL Fantasy Football Show. It's time for Don't Mess This Up, presented by Snickers. We have 3 big questions for Week 16, as we normally do this time on the show, to help you maybe not mess up some of your lineup decisions in a week that is incredibly critical for everybody. It is, win or go home, to steal a line from TNT in their NBA coverage. Let's start, though, with Kyler Murray, who last week seemed to be in the ultimate smash spot against the Detroit Lions. Instead, the Cardinals got smashed. The Lions get maybe the most surprising win of the season. The Cardinals now see their lead pretty much gone in the NFC West after the Rams beat the Seahawks on Tuesday night. But for fantasy, I mean, Kyler really let us down in a spot where you thought 20 points seemed to be inevitable. He got you, 12, 13 points? It was not a very good showing for him. How worried are we about this going forward, considering he's got a really tough defense in the Colts to face this week?
I'm not too worried about Kyler Murray. I know the last two games haven't been his best, but the one before that, he went off in week 13. The thing is, the Colts are a pretty tough defense, but their struggles come against the pass. So I'm still trusting Kyler Murray. I have him ranked as my QB6 this week, which is a little lower than normal, but I still think very high. Like, you don't have one of the 5 quarterbacks ahead of him likely if you have Kyler. So I think you continue to ride out with him. But yeah, you got to be a little bit more concerned because last week was such a smash spot. No D-Hop. The offense struggled, but I think I think at least Kyler Murray gets right against the Colts in this matchup.
I think so as well. I'd like to chalk this up as it just being a really bad game for whatever reason. I mean, no one saw it coming, but hopefully this is just, it's a speed bump sort of thing that, if nothing else, he can get out of the pocket. He can run some. He can make some plays with his legs. I think he still has plenty of targets to throw the football to. I think Zach Ertz has a great matchup. The Colts have been awful against tight ends. So even if he's not necessarily lighting up his wide receivers with opportunities, maybe the tight end gets some. Look, maybe you just throw some balls out of the backfield, whether it's James Conner or Chase Edmonds. But I'd like to think this is a bounce back week, in part because the Cardinals need this too. They need to right the ship. They're still very much in play for the NFC West title, but they got to win some football games. And part of that means Kyler Murray going out and being successful on the field for that to happen. Another quarterback that we got concerns about, Dak Prescott, who has really struggled. I mean, I know he had, was banged up midway through the season. Since then, just has never seemed to completely get right. And this week has a great matchup. I mean, you couldn't really ask for a better matchup than he's got against the Washington football team. They've given up the most points to quarterbacks all season long, but Dak has been driving the struggle bus lately. Do we consider putting him on the bench this week?
I think you consider it, but it all depends on what your options are. Because, look, I get it. Dak has been struggling mightily. He hasn't topped 12 fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 games. He played the same Washington defense when they brought their bench. That's the whole new thing in the NFC East. They're all bringing their benches to opposing stadiums. But he gave you less than 10 fantasy points in that one. But because of, one, the quarterback position has not been as strong this year as it has normally. I still have Dak as my QB9, just ahead of like Burrow, Wilson, Hill, Fields. So I'm thinking you still likely have to start Dak Prescott, but I would definitely be worried about it.
I don't think it's an automatic. I mean, when you drafted Dak, the idea was he was going to be set it and forget it, that you put him in your lineup and you left him there outside of a bye or possibly injury. But now here we are in week 16 in a situation where you got to have a win, and we're talking about maybe putting him on the bench. And it really does depend on who else you have. I think you're very much looking at the matchups, but also keep in mind, do you have somebody that has the ceiling of Dak Prescott? Do you have somebody that has the weapons around him? Like, you're not going to find too many teams that have a trio of receivers like Amari Cooper, CeeDee Lamb, and Michael Gallup. And so that's something to keep in mind. But where once it seemed like a slam dunk, where, if we had asked this question in September, people would have laughed at us and probably unsubscribed to the show. But now here we are in December, and we're having this conversation. We are having it for real because the idea of just automatically blindly starting your studs has gone out the window, because we've got, 14, 15 games of data to kind of lean back on. And at least the recent data for Dak Prescott has not been particularly great. Mentioned at the top of the show, the injuries in Tampa Bay. One of them is to Leonard Fournette, suffered a knee injury in the loss to the Saints on Sunday night. So that is going to keep him out at least for the next few weeks. So that pushes Ronald Jones to the front of the line. We know Keyshawn Vaughn is still there. By the way, the Buccaneers signed Le'Veon Bell, which really feels like a break glass in case of emergency sort of situation for Bruce Arians. I don't think that's going to really move the needle for fantasy types, but, it's fun to talk about it. Look, Le'Veon Bell is back in Tampa Bay. ISO Joe Johnson is back in the NBA. Like, we're just bringing all the flashbacks back right now across professional sports. But Ronald Jones, going to get plenty of opportunity as the lead running back in Tampa. But, what are your expectations for him? Do we like the matchup? How are we feeling about him this week?
Yeah, the Panthers are a little bit of a tough matchup against the run, but it's not enough to scare me off of Ronald Jones. Like, he is in my top 20 running backs. So I think if you get him off the waiver wire, you start him either as your RB2 or your flex. And I might even be bumping him up a little bit, Marcus. Right now at 18, ahead of him is Antonio Gibson, who got banged up last night, Zeke Elliott, who I've been pretty low on, and then the Broncos running backs and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. So, like, I'm going to be bumping up Ronald Jones a little bit now, but I haven't decided just how far yet, but that means he is firmly inside my top 20 running backs. So I think if you pick him up off the waiver wire, you just start him this week.
Let me correct myself real quick. I said a knee injury for Leonard Fournette. It's a hamstring injury that has him out right now. So either way, the result is the same. Yeah, I still think I think Ronald Jones is worthy of at least a flex opportunity, depending on who else you have on your roster. Just because we do like the volume, and it is a banged up offense. Jones has a lot of burst. He's a guy who can rip off chunks of yardage, even if he doesn't get involved in the passing game. And that's part of what made Fournette so productive this year, is that he was catching the football from Tom Brady. I don't think you can expect quite that from Ronald Jones, but I do think he is certainly worth getting some run. I mean, look, as I mentioned, someone out there on the internet, and I'm sure more than one someone, is talking about starting Ronald Jones over Saquon Barkley because we like the offense, we like the opportunity, and right now he seems to have a higher ceiling and maybe even a safer floor than Saquon Barkley does right now. So if you got
I'd play him over Saquon.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't. Here it is. Like we're saying this, and for you, it wasn't even a debate. It was, we're still starting Ronald Jones. So if you got him, I think you're plugging him in the lineup this week against the Carolina Panthers. All right. We are starting our game previews right now. Everything is still slotted between Thursday and Monday, and let's hope, keeping our fingers crossed, that everything stays that way and that we don't get pushed into Tuesday or possibly even Wednesday this week. So let's start on Thursday Night Football, a huge game, the 49ers against the Titans, which I guess creates an unofficial rivalry between me and producer Justin for the week. You see that game, of course, on NFL Network, on Fox, and streaming on Amazon Prime Video. I just want to make sure I get all the company lines in there. Please remember this later on. A.J. Brown is back. He at least returned to practice. He could suit up and play for this game against the 49ers this week. But, hey, man, it's been a while. Even when he's been on the field, really has underwhelmed this year. Does that play into your thinking at all when it comes to fantasy for this game?
A bit. My thinking is beware of all Titans, and you see there AJ Brown has been struggling as of late. I will say though, if AJ Brown returns, I'm very tempted to get him back into my starting lineup. I think I would use him, but the rest of the Titans, I'm not that interested in. I mean, Hill is such a low floor, low ceiling type of quarterback as of late. You're really hoping for a finger roll, a rushing touchdown out of him the last few weeks. Deontay Foreman is the running back that I trust the most there, but they like to get all three involved, and the 49ers have been tough on the ground, so that makes Foreman a little bit less appealing. And then outside of A.J. Brown, there's no pass catcher, none whatsoever, that I want to get in my starting lineup in week 16, where it's do or die. So for me, it's really A.J. Brown or bust when it comes to the Titans.
Injuries have bitten this team so badly. I mean, obviously, Derrick Henry is the big one, being on injured reserve, but Julio Jones struggling to stay healthy at all this year. A.J. Brown missing time this year. Injuries really have wrecked this team. Yet here they are, still hanging around, very much in line for a solid playoff position. Certainly, win what is not a great division in the AFC South, or at least could. I shouldn't say certainly, but very much could win the division down there. So, but yeah, this seems like a tough draw to start any Titans in this one at all against what has been a surging 49er team over the last few weeks. A couple of Saturday games on Christmas Day. It's a busy sports day on Christmas, but got games on NFL Network. First, the Browns and the Packers. That one kicks off at 4:30 Eastern. You can see that on Fox, on NFL Network, and streaming on Amazon Prime Video. I will say this. Start your stars in this one and really nobody else. So that means on the Cleveland side, probably just Nick Chubb. On the Green Bay side, you're talking about Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, maybe Aaron Jones, and that's kind of it. These defenses have been pretty good. They have been getting after it the last few weeks. And so any of those kind of fringe, mid-range guys that you're only hoping for, maybe you're hoping for a touchdown or you're hoping for them to pop a big play, that just seems like wish casting this week, and that's not something I think I want to fool around with. You're not going to sit Devontae Adams, obviously. You're not going to sit Nick Chubb, obviously. Aaron Rodgers, you're probably not sitting based on or depending on who else you have on your roster. So they're probably going to be playing for you. Beyond that, though, I don't know if you see any sleepers in this game, Florio. I was looking, I just couldn't find anybody outside of the huge name players that I felt comfortable with in this game.
Yeah, I was in on MVS initially, but he's on the COVID list now. So I think it's what you said. You know, you get your big name players in, the running backs, the top receiver for Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, and that's it. And I'm playing Aaron Rodgers in my league of record, and it's a primetime game. It's a national TV game on Christmas, Marcus. I'm bracing for him to drop like 30 fantasy points on me.
That gets us to the Colts and the Cardinals. That's an 8:15 Eastern time start. You can see that exclusively on NFL Network. And Florio, for you, what are you doing in this one?
I think you start Christian Kirk in this one. He's pretty much become a must-start receiver, in my opinion. Last week, I know it was a weird game against the Detroit Lions, but 12 targets, 9 catches, 94 yards, and a touchdown. He paced the like in every receiving set, he led them across the board. And I think we're going to continue to get some deep shots out of him. He's going to get good volume there. So, and like I said earlier, the Colts' strength on defense has been stopping the run. They have struggled in the secondary. So I think it's going to be a good end of the year, really, for Christian Kirk. I think if you've been holding him, you just continue to start him each week now.
He really is starting to pick up some of that slack, especially with DeAndre Hopkins down and out of the lineup. I do still think there's a lot of room in the offense for Zach Ertz this week against the Colts defense that has struggled against the tight end position. But should be an interesting one. Should be an entertaining game with both these teams really fighting for their playoff spots right now in the postseason. All right. Time for another break, but when we return, we've got more game previews. Which Chiefs can you consider this week, especially with all the COVID issues going around in Kansas City? I mean, look, besides some of the obvious ones. Stick around to the NFL Fantasy Football Show to find out. It's time to talk about TikTok, or at least time for me to talk to you about following us on TikTok at NFL Fantasy if you haven't done so already. I know that the season is drawing close to an end, but that doesn't mean you can't follow us. It doesn't mean we're not going to try and entertain and hopefully educate you throughout the offseason as well, because look, you know this. Fantasy is no longer just a seasonal game. It is a year-round pastime. It is a year-round pursuit. So come follow us there. Also, you can follow me at Marcus Grant. I plan to do some more weird things in the offseason. Maybe some of them fantasy football related. Who knows? Stick around. around, find out. All right. Back to the game previews. The Bills and the Patriots. This is a big one, obviously, for the Bills and for the Patriots as well. But Buffalo trying to ease the sting of that loss a couple weeks ago to New England. How do they do that, and how do fantasy managers capitalize?
I think they're going to do it with a way they couldn't do it earlier this year because of the weather. I think it's going to come through the passing game, and that means that you could fire up Gabriel Davis once again in fantasy football. Last week, had 7 targets, tied for the second most on the Bills, 5 catches, 85 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He's shown that he could be a red zone presence, a downfield option. That's what the Bills have kind of been lacking. They haven't had a direct replacement for John Brown in this offense this year. I think he is their best bet, but with Cole Beasley now out, even with Emmanuel Sanders returning to practice today, I think Sanders could slide into the slot maybe, and then we see more Davis outside. And with, the Patriots are going to be trying to take away Stephon Diggs in the passing game. They're going to need someone else to step up there. I think it will be Gabriel Davis. So I would just continue, like if you had him last week, just keep starting him this week.
I would agree. And you pointed out earlier in the week that they have found a nice role for Davis as a guy who can get down the field, make some long plays, and it seems like Josh Allen is getting more and more trust in him all the time. So, again, with no Cole Beasley, the play is still is still available if you want to go with Gabriel Davis. Ravens and the Bengals. Big game in the AFC North between a couple teams sitting near the top of the division. And I'll say this. Originally, I was going to say to beware of Tyler Huntley because the Bengals have been pretty good against quarterbacks. But really, after sort of looking at it again and thinking about it again, I have kind of changed my mind. And I think Tyler Huntley has some sleeper potential. Now, look, I don't know, how many guys you're going to start him over potentially this week. I don't know if you've got a Dak Prescott. I still think you probably start Dak over Huntley. But the fact that he went out and put up a huge number against the Packer defense gives me some confidence that Huntley can get it done for the Ravens if need be, whether it's throwing the ball to Mark Andrews, whether it's getting it out. He got it to Marquise Brown after we were worried whether or not Hollywood was going to be in play this week, but he was able to get the ball out to him. Got Rashad Bateman involved a couple of weeks ago, and on top of it, can run, can make plays with his legs. Yes, he's not Lamar Jackson, but he's doing a pretty good Lamar Jackson cosplay over the last couple of weeks. So just seeing what he has done the last 2 weeks, taking over in relief against the Browns and then getting the start against Green Bay, makes me feel like he does potentially have some sleeper potential this week. I don't know if I'm crazy. Now, mind you, obviously this is if he plays. Like, keep an eye on Lamar Jackson. If he's back, then this is completely moot. But I don't know. Am I nuts for thinking Tyler Huntley at least has some viability this week?
I don't think you're crazy at all. I mean, he put up 36 fantasy points in a very tough matchup against the Packers. I have him ranked right now as a high-end QB2, and I think if we get word that Lamar's out, I might even slot him up a little bit higher. But Marcus, real quick, on the other side of this game, Joe Burrow today said that the Bengals have been lucky with COVID and stuff because there's not a whole lot to do in Cincinnati, so they don't go out a whole bunch. So I guess that's one reason to feel good about your Bengals.
I guess so. All right. I mean, I guess you stay home and load up on Cincinnati chili, which, look, folks, if you love it, good for you. I had it. I was not a fan. Although maybe next time I'll try it with French fries instead of spaghetti. Maybe it'll make it better. I don't know.
The fact that the two options are spaghetti or French fries is wild.
Right? Like, I tried it with spaghetti, and I was like, I'm not really feeling this. I'm like, maybe next time if I ever do it again, it'll be I don't know. I don't know if that makes it better. So hit me up on Twitter. Tell me which one you prefer, if it's better with one or the other. I don't know. All right. Rams at the Vikings. The Rams trying to stay hot, trying to see if they can overtake the Cardinals and end up winning the NFC West. The Vikings still kind of doing their thing as well. What fantasy-wise are you doing for this one?
I'm starting Van Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr. And I know yesterday they both kind of disappointed. Jefferson only had 2 targets. Odell had 3. Neither one of them really gave you 5 fantasy points. So it was a rough day, partially because they were just running the ball all over Seattle. And also because, Cooper Kupp is just amazing. And he took all the passing production there. But the Vikings have been better against the ground than Seattle. Seattle's weakness has been against stopping running backs, so it makes sense that the Rams kind of played up to that strength there. But The Vikings, I mean, are the opposite. Like, they're better against the run. They struggle mightily against the pass. And we've seen it on national TV now multiple times in a row with like Big Ben putting up good games against them and Justin Fields putting up some good numbers against them. So I think that both of these Rams receivers are in play either as a wide receiver 2 or 3 or as your flex option. And of course, Cooper Kupp is the wide receiver 1, no questions asked.
I said earlier that there aren't a lot of teams that have a wide receiver trio that can match Amari Cooper, CD Lamb, and Michael Gallup. This is one. This is one of the few teams that can certainly match that with Cooper Kupp, Odell Beckham Jr., and Van Jefferson. Steelers and the Chiefs. Somehow Pittsburgh just, they keep finding ways to win. It's not pretty, but they find ways to just kind of, pull one out. Meanwhile, the Chiefs look like offensively maybe they're back. I mean, they put up a lot of points against the Chargers. They put up a ton of points the week before that against the Raiders. So maybe the offense is back. Again, we'll keep an eye on the COVID-19 issues with Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill right now in the protocol. So that's going to be something to monitor. But in the meantime, I like Clyde Edwards-Helaire kind of as a sleeper back. I know I said on Monday that he's a player that I wouldn't draft again, but it's 2021. That was 2022. We're not looking ahead right now. We're talking about the now. And in the now, CEH has a very good opportunity against a Steeler run defense that has been awful lately. 5 straight weeks they have allowed a top 10 fantasy back. And CEH, he's got 1 top 10 finish this year. Maybe he can double up and make it a second. We will see. But I certainly think the opportunity is going to be there against a Steeler run defense that has been just gashed lately. This also, I think, sort of applies to Darrell Williams as well, because he has still been very much involved in the offense. And if Mahomes is without one or maybe both of his top pass catchers, then I think you could see Darrell Williams get some opportunities in this game. But the Steeler run defense, I know it's sort of muscle memory to think that hey, it's the Steelers, maybe we should beware. But I really do think we can take advantage of him. I know we talked on Monday about Clyde Edwards-Helaire and his draft prospects. Are we still sort of holding to that maybe 4th round projection for next year?
I think so, but I agree with you. Like 2022 and right now are very different beasts. So right now, I think he's very much so in play because he could get more volume, like you said. And Marcus, I'm not starting him or picking him up or anything like that in fantasy, but small part of me is really hoping this is the Josh Gordon game.
He had a touchdown a couple weeks ago, right? I think I tweeted in 2021 that counts as that helps no one with Josh Gordon scoring touchdowns. Hey, look, I think we've all sort of agreed the dream is over. I'm glad that he seems to have gotten his life together and he's able to get back out and play. But for what we want, that ship has long since sailed. Anyway, we're talking starts and sits here. Of course, you can talk starts and sits on the Stardom Situm show with Michael F. Florio, Kimmy Checks, and Adam Rank. You know the deal. It's on every Thursday. They go through the list of starts and sits to get your roster ready for the game. Check it out Thursdays, 4 p.m. Eastern in the NFL Fantasy app, the NFL app, NFL.com, or the YouTube channel. Also available on demand. And Money Guns, because we can't forget the Money Guns.
Oh, we brought the Money Guns home this week. We're still using them.
Oh, yeah. Even better. So you got Money Guns at home. That's going to be great when they're just fake dollar bills flying all over your house. I'm sure the wife's going to
It's going to be fun to clean up.
Yeah, it's going to be great. Hopefully the dog doesn't eat any of them. You should
That's what I said. I was like, you guys want me to shoot this Money Gun with Callie running around? She's going to be going berserk. I'm still finding confetti from last year when we popped those confetti poppers.
Oh. Anyway, next on the NFL Fantasy Football Show, we saw Taysom Hill's floor on Sunday night against the Bucs. Will he stay there? Will he get up in Week 16? Try to figure it out when we return. It's time for Best of the Pack, presented by Panini Trading Cards. You know by now how this works. We open up a pack of Panini Trading Cards, and we talk about a couple of players that we find inside. So let's start with the Jaguars and the Jets game, and specifically we will talk about the one and only Trevor Lawrence, he of the number one overall pick, he the generational quarterback whose likes we hadn't seen in I don't know how many years. But through the first 15 weeks of the season, he's the QB 25. So without necessarily assigning a whole lot of blame as to who or why or what is the problem, is this better or worse than we expected for Trevor Lawrence?
This is way worse than I ever expected. I was a high guy on Trevor Lawrence coming into this year. I thought he was a top 15 quarterback with potentially low-end QB1 upside. I was like, look, the Jaguars passed a lot last year. It wasn't always pretty, but it was effective. They have good pieces around him, and like Marvin Jones and Chenault and Chark. And then it never came to fruition. I thought he would run more, especially near the goal line. And he's throwing one touchdown pass per game. Like I saw a stat that said like he has as many passing touchdowns in his last 7 games as Derrick Henry does. And I was just like, this is awful. Like a huge L by me, a big swing and a miss. And I just expected a lot better.
I mean, I think that was for everybody, though, right? I mean, you talked about the weapons that were around him. You talked about the fact that, they were bringing in a coach that it seemed like would be able to maximize his skills. And this passing game has been horrific. John Shipley, who does great work covering the Jaguars, go follow him on Twitter. Kind of compared this to the Blaine Gabbert era in terms of at least the production, right? I think we all concede that Trevor Lawrence is a more talented quarterback than Blaine Gabbert was. But in terms of what they've actually put out on tape and what they've put out on the field, it looks very similar. And that is, I think, the most disappointing part right now, because we all did expect more out of Trevor Lawrence. I was with you. I felt like he wasn't going to be a QB1 this year, but he was going to be a guy that you felt like in certain matchups you could start with confidence. And that really has not been the case at all. So I think for the Jaguars, the priority in the offseason is to bring in a coach who can mentor Lawrence to get him up to speed, because this guy is supposed to be the future of the franchise. You've pretty much wasted the first year with him. You've got to get this thing going in a hurry, for fear that you end up just sort of squandering what could be a great talent at quarterback. Meanwhile, on the other end of the spectrum, an older guy who's kind of just now getting his shot. It is Taysom Hill. It's the Saints this week taking on the Miami Dolphins. That's a Monday Night Football game in New Orleans. Last week, not a great week for Taysom Hill. They tried throwing the football 27 times with him. He ran it a little bit, wasn't really successful in either format. Was last week kind of an anomaly because he has been pretty good as a starter most of the time, or is this a warning of things to come?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think it's a warning that like maybe we were getting too excited on Taysom Hill. Myself was definitely one of those guilty parties. I had him in the top 10 last week. But I don't think it was this is a sign of things to come. I just think it is a sign that like, hey, he's not like an automatic 20 points. He can disappoint because he does have a lot of flaws as a passer, but I still have him ranked as the QB 12 this week because of what he can do with his legs, and that the quarterback position has some, missing parts and some banged up players. But I think it's a little of both, but not enough to scare me from using Taysom Hill this week.
I think it's also a reminder of how frighteningly low his floor can be if he's not scoring touchdowns. I mean, part of what has kept him relevant is getting in the end zone, whether it's as a runner or the occasional passing touchdown that he throws, but didn't do either of those things on Sunday night against the Bucs, and that's part of why he gave you less than 10 fantasy points. So I think it's just something to keep in mind. You're never going to get, a 300 or 350 yard passing game out of Taysom. Maybe I shouldn't say never, but it seems very unlikely that you're going to get, 300, 350 passing yards out of Taysom Hill. You could get close to 100 rushing yards, but you still need that touchdown or two in order to make it a pretty good week. So we'll keep an eye on that against a Dolphin defense that for the most part has been okay this year. So we'll see what happens on Monday Night Football between those two teams, and specifically with Taysom Hill. All right, back to our game previews. The Broncos and the Raiders. The Raiders keeping their playoff hopes alive with a last-second win against the Cleveland Browns on Monday afternoon. Now they head back to Vegas to take on their longtime rivals, the Broncos. What's your fantasy outlook for this one?
Avoid every pass catcher on the Denver Broncos. Look, this is a team that isn't going to throw the ball a whole lot any week. They like to rely on their running game and on their defense. And we know that the running backs are going to get like 30 touches a game between the two combined. That leaves not a whole lot of volume to go around to their 3 receivers that they like to use, their 2 tight ends that they like to start using now. So for me, I think you're looking at like an average game for these guys is somewhere in single digits. And like, yeah, maybe Drew Lock now gives them a little bit of a higher ceiling because he's more of a downfield thrower than Teddy, but he's also a lot less accurate, and he was benched for a reason. So for me, this is just a game where I think you start Javonte Williams, Melvin Gordon, and then you get away from the Denver Broncos.
I'm gonna say, yeah, you avoid all the pass catchers, but you're all in on their running backs, whether it's Javonte Williams or Melvin Gordon, because both those guys have been great pretty much all season long. The Bears at the Seahawks. I know Russell Wilson did not have a good night last night against the Los Angeles Rams, but I still think he is very much in play this week against the Chicago Bears. The Seahawks season essentially is over. They're going to have a losing record for the first time since, I believe, 2011. But that doesn't mean they can't go out and wreck somebody else's season. We hope that everything's okay with Tyler Lockett and he can come off the COVID-19 list and be available for this week. But the Bears are just giving up yards through the air to quarterbacks. We saw them struggle with Kirk Cousins the other night. Mostly we saw them struggle with Justin Jefferson, which I guess no shame in that because pretty much everybody has struggled with Justin Jefferson in his first 2 seasons. But I do think this is an opportunity where we can see Tyler Lockett, we can see DK Metcalf both go out and prosper. I know you mentioned Gerald Everett potentially as a streaming option at the tight end position. So while last night was awful, I think about 4 points for Russell Wilson in fantasy, I think this is an opportunity for him to kind of get back and try to finish out on a strong note. Also, I mean, this could a little bit be for Russ, maybe a reminder for other teams around the league about where he could, or about who he could be, I should say, because, you know, there's a very real conversation about whether or not he comes back to Seattle next year. So maybe this is also a showcase opportunity for Russ himself. But I definitely think he should be in a lot of lineups in Week 16. Bucs at the Panthers. I mean, we sort of touched on this earlier, but AB very much in play this week, huh?
Yeah, just another reminder to start him. Look, no Godwin. Mike Evans is banged up. We know he has got that hamstring injury. They're saying he has a chance to play, but even if he does, then AB is the wide receiver 2 there, top 3 in targets. And if Evans misses, I mean, then Antonio Brown becomes like a borderline wide receiver 1. I think they're saying he looks as good as he did before he hurt his ankle. I know you said earlier, Marcus, that him and Tom Brady have a real connection there. We've seen it on display time and time again. And earlier this year, AB was balling out before he got hurt. So just a reminder, if you stashed him, or maybe you were lucky enough to grab him off the waiver wire if people got sick of him waiting on this fake vaccine card suspension or something like that, just get him back in your starting lineup.
You know, I mean, there was all that talk at the beginning of the year about he and Tom Brady being roommates, and I'm like, that's a reality show I would love to see. I would love to watch. I'd watch an AB TB12 reality show. It's like, you know, it's like the Odd Couple in real life, right? You know, I can just imagine like, you know, Tom making his avocado smoothies or whatever it is he does while, like, you know, Antonio was like trying to film a rap video in the bedroom and making too much noise or something like that. Like, I'd be on
Tom
board
Brady
with
slams his like iPad down or whatever in anger.
Exactly. Like, shut up! I'm trying to study. You know, whatever it is, I would be all on board with watching that. Okay, we got one last break, and when we come back, we wrap up our game previews and we hit you with some Week 16 sleepers. Come on back now to the NFL Fantasy Football Show. Got a handful of game previews just to finish this one off. By the way, some news that just came down as we were recording the show. Harrison Butker has been placed on the COVID-19 reserve list. He is reportedly unvaccinated, so that means he will not be playing for the Chiefs this week. So that means if you are starting Butker as a kicker in leagues that still have kickers, which I'm okay with, thumbs up to you folks, it means he's going to be unavailable for you this week. So that's something to keep in mind heading toward the weekend. Chargers at the Texans. We talked about Austin Eckler at the top of the show. First was on the COVID list. Turns out that was inaccurate. Now he is off the COVID list. But I will say this. If you're looking for a deep sleeper or maybe a DFS play, try Rex Burkhead. We are back to hashtag Rex in the flex. I know that it's hard talking about any Texans offensive players not named Brandon Cooks, but Rex Burkhead has taken over as the lead rusher in that Houston offense. He is by far getting the most carries in the offense, well ahead of David Johnson or anybody else there. And the Chargers, they have not been good against running backs for most of the year. Now, understand that the floor is stable, but it's kind of low. The ceiling is not super high. You're definitely going to need some touchdowns, for that to boost up a little bit. But if you are looking for a value play, if you're looking just to kind of fill out a roster and you need maybe a flex option there, Burkhead has a good opportunity and is not going to cost you a whole lot. Not going to eat up a ton of salary in any of your daily lineups for this one. Lions at the Falcons. Jared Goff, as we mentioned, currently on the COVID-19 reserve list. We'll see if he's going to be available for this one. But the Lions flying high after their big win over Arizona. Which side do you land on, and what should we be doing?
I think you should be starting Russell Gage, and I have him ranked as like a high-end wide receiver too. I don't think enough people realize how good Russell Gage has been. In the last month, he's given you double-digit fantasy points in all 4 games, with over 18 in 3 of them. And in 2 of his last 3 games, he has 11 or more targets. He's been getting more usage in the red zone. He is just a consistent player now that I think brings a floor of double-digit fantasy points, and he's shown us in the last couple of weeks that his upside is over 20. So to me, that is a wide receiver too, and I know a lot of the times people overlook players like Russell Gage because of their name and the fact that they kind of disappointed early on, but he has been getting the job done as of late. So if you have him and you're still in the fantasy playoffs, I think you start this guy, especially given how many receivers are just out of our lineups right now.
It's been very quiet. At least, we haven't talked about it, I know, on this show. And you don't hear a lot of conversation about Russell Gage. I think when you talk about the Falcons, you talk about Cordero Patterson, really. And maybe you talk a little bit about how Kyle Pitts has sort of been underwhelming. But I do have some positive thoughts about that a little bit later on as we wrap up the show. Giants at the Eagles. And aside from us talking about Evan Ingram maybe as a deep sleeper or something like that, I think you have to start Miles Sanders. And what we saw out of him last night against the Washington football team was incredibly encouraging. About 130 rushing yards. Led the team in backfield snaps, led the team in backfield touches by a wide margin, and was incredibly effective with it. The Eagles have really made it a point to run the football. I shouldn't say by a wide margin. He actually had 18 carries to 15 for Jordan Howard, but nearly doubled up on him in rushing yards. But the Eagles have made it a point to be a lot more run heavy in the back part of the season, and they're running the ball effectively. The Giants continue to struggle pretty much in every aspect of the game right now, so I like Miles Sanders. I know we've sort of been hot and cold with Sanders so far this year. I don't know. How do we feel about him now? How do we feel about him, say, going into 2022?
I feel better about him now than I did at this time yesterday, because he looked really good yesterday, and they got him the ball a good amount. I know Howard had a lot of volume, but that came like later in the game. My only concern with Miles Sanders is they don't let him score touchdowns. He still doesn't have a touchdown on the year. When they get near the goal line, it's all Howard or Hurts. So I think Sanders is in play this week, but he's more of an RB2 for me just because the touchdowns. Like, if he could score, if we knew that he was like going to get the goal line work as well, then I think you could make a case for him as a high-end RB2, maybe even a little bit higher than that. And as for 2022, I think he's a player that his value could swing a lot. Like if Hurts and Howard are all back and it's a similar offense, I think then that Sanders is like an RB2 that I probably won't be too excited to target. But fantasy Twitter loves him and his talent, so I think there'll be plenty of people back in on Miles Sanders.
Talk about him not scoring touchdowns, and it's him and Devin Singletary just sort of, pointing at one another right now. Last one, Sunday Night Football, the football team at the Cowboys. A win for Dallas locks up the NFC East. We talked about Dak Prescott and his struggles. What else should we be talking about for fantasy here?
This pains me to say, but I think you got to beware of Terry McLaurin. He just hasn't been what we've wanted him to be this year. And I don't think it is a Terry McLaurin problem. I think it is a quarterback and inability to get Terry McLaurin the ball problem. But for fantasy, we don't care whose fault it is. We care about the production. And since week 5, he has topped double-digit fantasy points just 3 times. Twice was over 21. We love that. The other time was 12, and he has a whole bunch of games with single digits mixed in. So his floor is single digits. Maybe he'll catch a long one or a touchdown and give you over 20. To me, that is a boomer bust wide receiver 3. He is outside of my top 30 wide receivers, and I don't think he's a guy that you need to start at all. I think, if anything, he's a guy that maybe you're going a little bit deeper and hoping for upside with.
Yeah, and it really stinks, though, that we get to week 16 and now all of a sudden we have concerns about Terry McLaurin, because he was one of those guys that you could just have confidence in every single week. But the quarterback does matter, and right now the quarterback is an issue in Washington. All right, that gets us through our game previews. It also means it's time for MVP picks presented by Visa, a network giving small businesses tools to grow. Wrap up the show as we always do with some sleepers. We each have a pair. Who's your first one?
My first one is Josh Reynolds for the Detroit Lions. Now, obviously, Jared Goff's status does impact Josh Reynolds, but I think if Goff is out there, Reynolds could be in your starting lineup. The Falcons are a great matchup against receivers, and Reynolds has been more consistent than I think he gets credit for. In the last month, 5 targets at least in every single game. His low is 8 fantasy points, but he has double digits in the 3 others. Scored 19 last week, and the Lions came out and said, we want to take more downfield shots, and that's exactly what they're doing since they've gotten Josh Reynolds. He has at least 1 target of 20-plus air yards in every game since he's been a Detroit Lions, and multiple in some of them. So in a good matchup with a guy that we know is going to get some downfield shots, I think he's in play as a sleeper.
It's weird that right now it's Goff and Reynolds playing for the Lions, but in some ways they sort of played for the Rams last week. They went out and got a big win against Arizona, helping out their old club. So I'm sure the folks in LA were grateful to see that. My first sleeper is Albert Okwuegbunam, the other tight end in Denver. I mean, we spent a lot of time talking about Noah Fant, and he's been fine. He's been sort of up and down. And I know that you said earlier to avoid all Denver pass catchers, and I think for the most part you're right. This is very much a deep sleeper play. You're certainly hoping for a touchdown. But look, you go back to week 9. He's got a 13% target share, which is identical to Courtland Sutton. The difference is Okwuegbunam has 9 more catches, 143 more receiving yards, and 1 more touchdown. The Broncos run a lot of 2 tight end sets, which means he's going to be on the field quite a bit. And the Raiders are struggling against the tight end position. So if you just want to kind of be contrarian, if you want to maybe try to find a value pick in DFS, Albert O has some deep sleeper upside in an offense that otherwise you just really kind of want to stay away from their passing game. Your next sleeper.
Mine is Laquan Treadwell, and yeah, that's where we're at now in the football season. But Laquan Treadwell in the last month has at least 5 targets in all 4 games, and he has somewhere between 9 and 12 fantasy points in all 4 of those. So again, not a super high ceiling, but more of a safe floor type of receiver that you can rely on volume. And hey, he gets the Jets this week, who have been struggling mightily against the pass, the run, everything as of late. So I think if you're in a deeper league or going for a cheaper DFS play, something like that, Treadwell can give you like a safe 10 points with maybe a little bit more upside just because of the matchup.
Every time we talk about a Jaguar, I just get a little sad in my heart that it's not Laviska Shenault, because that's how the season is going. My last one is Kyle Pitts, and you want to talk about where we are here. I mean, I didn't think we'd be getting to the point where we're talking about Kyle Pitts as a sleeper. He just felt at some point like he was just going to be an every week starter. I know that coming into Tuesday's games, he was the tight end 5, but I don't know that he necessarily had been playing like a top 5 tight end. And the other part is he hasn't really lined up as much as a tight end. This could be a situation where maybe the Falcons use him as such. The Lions struggling against the position. 4 different tight ends have had top 12 finishes against Detroit since week 12. You talked about Russell Gage as being a nice option this week. Maybe Kyle Pitts gets into the action. We are longing for another big Kyle Pitts game. It has been a while. Maybe this is a chance to sort of ease some of those frustrations, both for him and for fantasy managers. If any fantasy managers out there are still plugging him into their lineups, who knows? But it has not been great for Pitts for much of the year. You want more sleepers? I write about them every single week. You can check it out at NFL.com/sleepers. And if you want more of just all of this stuff, you can check out NFL Fantasy Game Day. This week's just a two-man Bob. It's me and Michael F. Florio. That's it. So you can come check us out starting at noon Eastern on all the NFL apps and streaming on YouTube as well. So it should be fun. It'll just be like another version of this, basically, except we'll be in the same room, sitting on comfy chairs, and we'll have buckets of fake chicken and Crocs with like little drumsticks on them. It'll be a whole thing. Come check it out. So it should be fun. I guess this is our last one though before Christmas, right? You and I aren't going to reconvene here before Christmas Day. So Merry Christmas to you, Michael F. Florio.
Merry Christmas to you and to your family. I hope you have a great one, and I hope we're both a little maybe struggling on Sunday morning, because then that'll mean we had a good Saturday.
Absolutely. Merry Christmas as well to producer Justin, producer Hytham, to all the specialists who help us put on this show. Wishing you all the best. And Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to all of you out there who listen, who stream this, who read what we do. We certainly appreciate all of you. And best of luck to you in the fantasy playoffs. In the meantime, for us, that is it. We are done. We appreciate you hanging out with the NFL Fantasy Football Show presented by Subway. You know the drill. Tell two friends to tell two friends. Rate, review, and remember, there shouldn't be a need to nail down coffin lids. Be safe. Take care of yourselves. Get vaccinated. Have a very, very Merry Christmas. And we will see you next week.